Hi, this is Rose. And before we begin, have you charged like a bull?
Meet Rose Odette, tech trailblazer, EMR pioneer, and $100 million founder. Her book, Charge Like a Bull, unveils 7 strategies to scale without investors, crush your limits, dominate emerging markets, forge unstoppable alliances. Ready to break through? Get your copy on Amazon now.
Hey, grab your copy of Charge Like a Bull and Charge Like a Bull game plan book. You don't need book 1 to get the game plan book. Skip that 450 pages if you want to get right to work like I usually do. They'll both be out on Amazon waiting for you, and you'll find the link in the show notes. And a sneak peek, if you're more into Audible books, the Audible book will be ready at the end of June of 2025, and I've already listened to the first 30 minutes, and it's amazing. I did not narrate it. I hired a professional actor to narrate it, and thank God I did. Anyway, see you in the podcast. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Bullish on Business. And today we're super excited to have Reggie Pacis with us with the Butzel immigration firm here in Michigan. I think I may have mispronounced it, so we'll make sure that we get that cleared up in a second. But I just have to tell you that I am so excited to have Reggie on today. He's a shareholder, a veteran immigration attorney, over 25 years. We really look forward to having his expertise on this immigration-focused, especially business immigration podcast. And so with no further ado, I want to introduce you to Reggie. Hi, Reggie. How are you doing today?
Hi, Rose. How are you doing? And so my last name is Pacis. Think pasta.
Oh, pasta.
Right?
Okay.
Pasta. But if you were Canadian, my Canadian cousins would say Pacis. So Pacis is fine.
Okay,
so,
thank you for clearing that up.
And then it's Butzel Long. So we're a first service law firm. I'm based out of the Detroit office. In fact, I can see the Detroit Windsor Tunnel right out my window right there. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Right down here in the Motor City.
Motor City, heart of it.
Is it 80 degrees down there today?
I think it's higher than that. I think it's like 84, 85. Feels like summer, but with the leaves changing color and falling to the ground, it's playing tricks on me. So
Soccer game tonight, so we're glad. It's a little bit too hot for the kids, but we'll take the good weather.
Yeah.
As long as we can. Well, let's jump right into your immigration practice and your expertise in that area. You've been practicing United States immigration law for over 25 years. And man, especially in the recent past, things have been evolving and changing. What have you really seen evolve? How did the field evolve, especially, in the corporate and the employment space? So, they don't really get the headlines like some of the other immigration topics. So what have you seen change and evolve through the years?
Yeah, so I tell people immigration is not sexy, but it's got teeth, and that's not my line. That's Tom Cruise's line from the movie The Firm. So yeah, it's got teeth. What have I seen change? So, when I started out, I thought immigration was pretty tough. I mean, it's pretty loosey-goosey in terms of it's administrative law, so you don't appear before Article 3 courts as we would normally think of them. Not all the constitutional rights do pertain. Like, for instance, when you're in immigration court, hearsay is admissible. All right, unless it gets to an actual trial level before an Article 3 court. Everything falls under the umbrella of the executive branch, Article 2. So the president is the immigration service prosecutor and also the immigration judge. So they have a lot of authority and a lot of discretion, wide discretion as to what they can do with immigration. So it's not like where you get court review. I mean, they try and set up a structure for meaningful court review, but at the same time, it all falls under the same executive branch, Article 2 power. So, and with that, what I've seen is, immigration is such a hot potato political item that really politicians on both sides of the aisle generally don't want to touch it. And the ones that do generally just want more and more stricter enforcement. And the fact of the matter is that with the fact that our immigration system relies on putting certain quotas or number limits on certain types of immigration classifications or visas, or whatever you want to call it, green card numbers, whatever. And those numbers were generally based on 1990. So if you could think back to 1990, what it was like then, the demands of our immigration system were not as critical as they are now. We weren't in the critical marketplace as much for foreign talent as we are now. And travel patterns were not nearly as much as they are now. I mean, back then, a lot of our manufacturing was here in the United States. Now the manufacturing, it's been a global, especially the automotive industry, has been very global stretch of production. So you have people coming back and forth all the time. And so the number one thing I think I've seen is that it's kind of, I tell people it's like a computer that was built in the 1990s. It's breaking down, it's slowing down, really slow, and they're trying to do patches to keep the computer going, but they won't seriously upgrade the computer.
Wow.
That's about the best metaphor I can think of, that everything's gotten slower, things have been broken down. You have, the border has been, people are trying to rush through because they think they're not incentivized to follow the legal pathway. All right. So once I think once they're incentivized to follow the legal pathway, you'll start to see illegal immigration go down and legal immigration go up. But that's just my own personal opinion.
Reggie, I have to say, you have taught me so much in this first 2 minutes. Number one, you brought up administrative law, and that is unique to this podcast. We jump usually into the weeds, and what you did is you brought it up to, hey, let's talk about the Constitution, really, where does this law, who's in charge, and administrative law is different than, the other kind of, the different types of law. And so the other thing I really love that you touched on is something I really love to work with, are mega trends. And a mega trend is, AI or other things like that. And migration is a mega trend in the world today, and that is immigration and travel. And your analogy to say that this is a 1990s like system that is getting patched and band-aids, and it's just, you can see it's just not working the way it used to, is what I'm hearing you say. Things were smoother in the 90s and the 2000s.
Yeah, it's essentially it. I mean, there's some good things still about it. I mean, it is a market-based system, I like to think of it. I mean, when I say market-based, I mean, like, you can't just come in generally and say, hey, I'm going to stay, at least under the immigration rule, right? You have to be sponsored by someone. That means somebody, whether it's an employer or a family member or even the U.S. government, wants to sponsor you to come in. So it's market-based, supply and demand, right? So that is a nice feature of that. I mean, if an employer needs workers in a particular, I don't know, XYZ field, they'll go out and get them. When the Y2K thing happened in the 2000s, we had a need for more computer programmers. So we went out and temporarily increased, and this is one of those patches I was talking about for sticking with the computer analogy. They temporarily increased the H-1B cap numbers from 65,000 to 195,000 for 3 years. And then once the Y2K issue passed, they went back down to what it was. Again, that's one of the temporary patches they did to try and fix it. But we never hit those caps. And now with the 65,000, I mean, it's gotten so bad now that they have a lottery system that you have to, pay a fee to be in the lottery to get your ticket. And then if you're selected, then you can file for your H-1B for your foreign national worker. So, but again, there's still the fact of the matter is that it's a market system is still a good thing because it requires sponsorship, it requires demand. I mean, contrast that with Canada's, and I'm not trying to pick on the Canadians, but the Canadians, they have generally a point system. You get so many points for speaking English, so many points for speaking French, so many points for being an engineering background, stuff like that. And once you hit a certain point threshold, then you get what's called a Canadian landed immigrant status, which is the Canadian green card. Here in the U.S., you have to be sponsored by an employer or sponsored by the U.S. government, such as political asylum, or you'd be sponsored by a family member, such as a spouse, a U.S. citizen spouse. So ours is a demand thing, and I think that is still critical to our ability to compete in the world because if you look at the pool of talent in the world for human talent, it's very limited. So, and we're competing with them. We're competing with the Europeans, the Chinese, the Indians all the time. And I mean, imagine what would have happened if during World War II or pre-World War II, we hadn't sponsored or or employers hadn't sponsored all those German scientists and Italian scientists who came over, who helped us develop the atomic bomb. That would have meant that Hitler and the Nazi Germans would have gotten it first. Think how different the world would have been. I mean, that's kind of like where we're at now. We're letting go of our competitive edge by making immigration so difficult to deal with.
Your insights are fantastic, Reggie. You have so many unique insights. I love the market-based system, and that you need to be either wanted by a company, a government, or a spouse, or some family member. It's market-based, and I love the comparative analysis you did to, I thought you were going to bring up NASA and some of those.
Oh, we could do NASA too, but yeah.
You brought up the whole Oppenheimer business, which was super timely at that time, and I watched the movie like everybody else, and really did ring true. I really appreciate your perspective. So between H-1B or business and family, which is where do you see the most struggle? Like, do you see issues with the family immigration, with your clients' family-based petitions versus these, the H-1B specialty or any employer visa employment?
Well, I mean, I'll be honest. I was blessed when I first got into this business to work for a law firm that taught me, and that's George P. Mann and Associates. It's a small firm. I was blessed to work at a law firm where we did all three areas of immigration: employment sponsorship, family sponsorship, and government sponsorship, with political asylum, for example. That's the most critical. And there's also something called cancellation removal, but political asylum seems to be the one that they hit the mainstream. And, depending upon who practices in those areas, everyone will say, oh, well, the political asylum refugee thing is pretty heartstring pulling. And then, but I'll be honest with you. I mean, all three of them have their own issues. I mean, at the end of the day, the reason for that is because they're all dealing with people, right? I mean, you're dealing with sometimes a computer programming major who's an Indian background, might be a single guy, but he's just as disheartened if his case isn't set for the H-1B as the PhD worker is, or as the family member who's stuck outside the United States because their case is moving at such a glacial pace because of all the backlogs and the cut in staff and all that stuff, or the asylee refugee who's fleeing persecution. I mean, all those stories are just as important. They can be heart-wrenching. So I can tell you some of my cases, some of those heart-wrenching cases are even employment-based cases where something in their immigration history came back to haunt them, and they still had to go back or leave, and they had family here. So, and again, I'm not trying to demean or weaken in any way what the refugees go through or what the family members go through, but I mean, at the end of the day, they're all people and they all struggle.
It's just like everyone else. I can hear you there. So employers compliance and the I-9s verification, that's huge hot button in today's environment. So what is the biggest mistake that you see companies make in the area of the I-9 verifications?
Okay, so I'm gonna take it on a macro level rather than a micro level. I can zoom in on a micro level in a minute, but the macro, I honestly don't think that employers take the I-9 and the employer verification process seriously enough. I really don't. Until what happened with Georgia and the Korean company down south recently. You may remember that Hyundai was raided. Yeah.
Article on my newsletter.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I'm doing a presentation discussing that tomorrow. And I just came from an event where I got asked a question about that. So it seems to be on their minds. And I think the thing is, you got to be proactive and you got to think ahead. That's something.
Reggie, an EB-5, and I thought they like EB, because that was an EB-5 regional center project back in the day.
Oh yeah. If you're going back in history, but yeah, you're right. That was a big, huge investment, EB-5 investment. And what that involved was, okay, so it's a Korean company that's bringing in the battery technology. Okay. they probably have all sorts of patent materials that have to come in and be installed. Well, guess what? Those patented materials are not invented by US workers. They're invented by Korean workers or South Korean workers. And some of those South Korean workers don't work necessarily for Hyundai. They work for other suppliers. So they were charged with coming into the United States, getting things set up, and then training the US workers in Georgia on how to do that. All right. Now, we'll never know all the facts of it because those workers have said, you know what? I'm out. None of them were deported. It's just when the government of South Korea came back to get them, the US gave them the option to stay and finish up. Once they looked at all their paperwork, my understanding is that they were given the option to stay, and only one worker stayed, and that's because he's in the green card process. The other ones, they all went back, and now South Korea is revisiting their interest in that investment. That's my understanding. Now, I'm not saying everybody's perfect, and there's a lot of abuse that's going on in immigration. The Immigration Service does have an important job in terms of enforcing the law and watching out for those abuses. But it's just not a good look when they just came in and shackled everybody and asked questions later, rather than doing their due diligence ahead of time. Again, I'm not really close to the case. I know I have some attorney friends who are, and of course they can't say too much. But what they have said on the media is led me to believe that there were some mistakes a little bit on both sides. I think the company should have been prepared a little more. Of course, it's easy to say that after the fact, and that's a typical example of how companies don't take this I-9 process and the immigration process as seriously as they should, because I'm sure they did, but now they're really looking at it. They're going to make sure their I-9s are in detail. And those visitors, they weren't even workers of the company, so there would be no I-9s for them. They would just be here as a visitor installing machinery, which they're allowed to do. Like, my question is, why didn't they have their documents that they brought to the border when they first came in on them so they could show the ICE officer? I don't know, So little things like that, little mishaps. My understanding, one of the attorneys for the one South Korean said there wasn't even an interpreter there, so they had to talk to each other through Apple devices, translation apps, which is also another problem. I mean, why didn't ICE bring a translator? Why didn't that plant have a translator? I mean, so it was just an unfortunate situation. But I think, if people start to take it more seriously, and again, I think they take it seriously, but they don't take it seriously enough. Hopefully mishaps like that will not happen again.
I was guilty of that as an employer. I can tell you that, running a business, you've got so many things that you really rely on your HR department, and what gets measured gets done. And if the executive office doesn't make it important, then sometimes the departments aren't as hot on a topic on the dashboards and on the measurements and the cadence of tracking all of these things. And so I think that bringing I-9 to the table. Now, Reggie, you're an amazing guest, because people have been bemoaning that whole South Korean issue in, I believe it was near Savannah and Georgia, and you're the first guy that brought up the I-9. And if they had educated the people that were coming in to help install their with their unique skills that they brought to the table, and let them know that they needed to make sure that they were, especially in times like these, that they had papers on them, that might have saved everyone a little bit. But everyone's emotions are running so high right now. So let's move to business and talent mobility. You specialize in uniting talent with companies, and I like the market analysis perspective you gave it. For executives listening to this podcast, and we have quite a few, we have like 17,000 out there on LinkedIn, and quite a few on the other platforms. For executives listening or watching, what should they know about using immigration strategically? How do you leverage this as a strategy in their strategic planning and in their HR planning?
Well, usually when they come to me, they've got a plan to expand markets. It could be a foreign company coming to the US and expanding the US market, or it could be a US company trying to bring in foreign talent to expand in a foreign market. All right. So they've already done that due diligence on that part. So when they come to me, and they always, they'll say, I got this executive, I got this worker, I got anything. Tell me a strategy. People only think about how can I get them in, right? And the question, the thing is, you want to get them in the proper way, but also what's the long-term plan for this employee? It sounds like and I'll tell them, it sounds like you've done some due diligence on this employee. Excuse me. What's the plan to bring them in? And then do they want to stay? Does the family want to stay? Things like that. You always got to think for the long term. Whenever I see a case, I'm always thinking, okay, are they thinking about becoming a green card holder or even a U.S. citizen? And if not, that's okay. But I always try and put them in immigration classification to leave them an option open that they want to do it. So for instance, if I got, say, we have a treaty with Germany, allows German nationals to come in to work for German-owned companies. Okay, so and that's an E2 classification because the U.S. company its primary investor is a German-owned company. All right, so I'll pick the E2 for instance. Someone comes in as an E2, an automotive supplier. I bring him in as an E2, and I'll say, okay, we got the person in, or we're about to get the person in. Well, what's your goal with this guy? Is this guy just to come back and forth between here and Germany, or is this guy supposed to come here and stay for a while, and then maybe if he likes it or she likes it, then you switch them to an immigration category that allows them to have a path towards a green card, because many classifications do not allow you to have the intent to get a green card. We call them non-immigrant classifications. E is one, another one's a visitor, which, again, those were those Hyundai workers or a visitor. Like if you and I go to Canada, we're a visitor. H-1Bs and L-1s. H-1Bs are your professional workers. Those are your positions that require a bachelor's degree or higher, such as your engineers, your doctors, your lawyers, and all that stuff. So, those, and then there's your L-1s, which are your intracompany transfers. L-1s and H-1s are the only classification that allows you to have green card intent at the same time as having non-green card intent. Every other classification requires you to have non-green card intent. So you want to keep the employee in a position, particularly now, that when they see an immigration officer because they're traveling back and forth, that they do not have the intention to get a green card. And if they do, hopefully you've put them in H and L classification. Now the problem with that, with the H and L classification is L, there are certain limitations on that. They had to be an employee for the company for at least 1 year in the last 3. The L1A, which is a manager executive, is good for 7 years. The L1B is only good for 5 years. The H1B is only good for 6 years. So you have a limited window, and the green card process could take years. So I try and get, like, going back to this German national, I try and get them in a classification which has a longer limit. An E2, they have a visa for 5 years, which means they can travel back and forth, and every time they enter, they can stay for up to 2 years. All right. So we can get them another E visa in 5 years, and then we can get them another one in 10 years. So that one could just keep going as long as the company's owned by a German company and he's a German national. So I say when you bring in this E2, what's your plan for this guy? If the plan is, he's going to go back once he trains us or whatever, keep him on the E2, send him back. If the plan is to keep him, is to pursue the green card, then we got to look into switching him to a status such as an H, or if he worked for the company before, an L, and then do the green card process. But save that precious L1 and H time, because it's finite for when we're actually going through the green card process. So those are the strategies that I usually look at when dealing with employment-based immigration cases, when an executive is thinking about nationally from an immigration standpoint. I was like, what's the end game here?
Which is so important. I know when they have dual intent, that's a hot button for the immigration aid official, and they listen for that. They want to know that. And as someone that is like an executive in a company that is working with you, that's not their decision. That's the person that's moving over here's decision. And so do you often have time? Do you spend time with the person, or are you working with the firms? Do you get to spend time with the immigrant?
Oh yeah, most of the time I actually work with the company and the company contact HR people, but I also work with the foreign national, and just trying to figure out what's your goal. I mean, I have to too. I mean, there are other reasons too. For instance, there could be something negative in their past legal history. They got a criminal conviction, or that the employer doesn't know about, that the employer can ask about.
What about social media? Do you check social media out these days?
I've on occasion had to, and I remind them that now they're checking social media, and you actually have to report all your social media identifiers on the visa applications. So whatever you got there, I mean, they're going to see it. So yeah,
Read an article just this week that if all of a sudden you've deleted all your social media, they're looking at that as well.
yes, they are. Yeah, they're trying to figure out what you're hiding.
Yes,
So
what's going on there. So cross-border travel, let's go there.
yep.
In intercompany transfers, you mentioned the L1 visas, and they're really key to the global companies, and I actually use that. How are your United States policies helping or hindering right now? Anything new happening with the L's right now, or is it pretty much status quo?
Well, the president has indicated that he's in favor, especially after the Hyundai incident, he's in favor of businesses trying to relocate here or trying to help manufacturing and stuff. So we've been successful still in getting L1s through, or and things like that. I will tell you though, I mean, travel is down. Interest is, people are concerned. I just had a client tell me that they're going to put a pause on their immigration plan to bring over a foreign worker here, because of the tariffs and because of what's going on with how people are treating immigration, people with immigration.
Closely with Cadillac and the team up here, the Chamber of Commerce and the Industrial Fund and 20 Fathoms in Traverse City, Michigan. And I've been a big advocate of let's go out and recruit some of these automotive companies to come to Northern Michigan, because after NAFTA, we lost a lot of our manufacturing base to Mexico. And I think this is an opportunity to bring some of those manufacturing jobs back. What's your point of view on?
Well, so NAFTA is interesting. Yeah, we lost the manufacturing jobs to Mexico, but I think one interesting thing about NAFTA is that, for instance, it made it very easy for us to bring Mexican engineers up to the United States. All right, and Canadian engineers, by the way, too. Because it's both countries.
What's that? That's the E.
It's called the TN. So, and that again is a non-immigrant classification, which
Right.
doesn't lead to a green card, but you can keep renewing it and renewing it and renewing it. So my thought is, at some point, maybe some employers moving into the northern lower Michigan area ought to start recruiting engineers from Canada and Mexico, and then that might drive up the technical piece of U.S. workers, because you've got the middle professional class and then the middle technician class there. You got a pool of talent there. That's something we could exploit. But I've never seen I've only seen few employers exploit that. They're usually down here. So
We help in that area. We've actually got a case I want Caitlin to talk to you about offline. So
that's fine. Yeah, sure.
you are really selling yourself here, your skills. I had no idea they were so deep. I should have, knowing that you'd been in the biz for 25 years. So
That's all right.
remote work. Let's talk about that. How has the conversation around visas and global mobility shifted? Have you read the 4-Hour Work Week, where you can sit on the beach with a laptop and work anywhere in the world? That kind of mobility, because of the internet and because of mobile and remote workers, they can basically work any place. Has that crossed your desk where they are actually working in a foreign country, or people coming in here and just using their technology, but they're really on a different country's soil? Right.
Well, that came up a lot during COVID, because part of it is we had to shift from the immigration piece. One of the requirements of the H-1B is you actually have to make sure they're being paid above the prevailing wage at the worksite location. So if they're working from home, let's say if the job is in Detroit, but they're working from, say, Chicago, all right, they're supposed to be paid the prevailing wage, whichever's higher, of Detroit or Chicago. Chicago is probably a little bit higher, depending upon the position. So you're supposed to be paying them a higher position. So we'd have to disclose both worksite locations on the H-1B petition, which means that the government could come to the home to make sure the guy's working, because it's been reported. Now, we did see a lot of work issues from foreign countries, and obviously when they're outside the country and they're in their home country, they can do whatever they want. They can work for any employer. And so we would only need say an H-1B or an L-1 classification for them to come into the United States when they came in, because when they came in, they were going to visit the company, they were collecting a salary from the company, they needed work authorization.
Mhm.
All right. That has died down a bit from working from home countries, particularly with what's going on with, travel bans, logistics of, the infrastructure here in the United States is still much better than, say, abroad. We're doing this conversation between Cadillac and Detroit right now, which is, the internet's still good and all that stuff. But if we try to do this from abroad, I've had web conversations with people in other parts of the world. It's very difficult to do that. So, and so if it's very difficult just to have conversations about immigration issues, it's definitely very difficult to do work. And so companies are trying to come back to like synergies, like being able to work with teams and stuff. And if you want to be able to develop business, there's nothing better than meeting the person that you're doing business with face to face.
And post-pandemic, everyone's craving that human touch.
Yeah. So we're starting to see that to come back. But there are some workers who are still trying to work from home. The problem is that they're not work. And we work in such a team-focused environment. They're not part of the, they can't have that synergy with the team. So, don't get me wrong. Remote work can be advantageous. Like if I have to leave to pick up my kid from school, I could leave, pick him up, then resume work from home. All right. I don't have to necessarily live in the same area where I'm actually physically working. So there are places for that. But I'm actually a fan of being in the office, as you can see. So, so as much as you can. Well, you're in the office. If it's your business, you can be in your own office.
Well, the thing I think you bring up is really very interesting because we do crave, I do, but I'm old school. I love being in the office. I love the camaraderie, having a cup of coffee, meeting in the conference room, really kind of digging up and bringing out the whiteboard and doing the whole bit. But, a lot of the millennials and whatever initial we're using for these 20-year-olds, and they're so online all the time that they're being recruited. They're just wanting to be a remote worker. So we're going to see a lot more of that.
Yeah, we are.
It's just a trend as we evolve. So let's talk about policy and big picture. You've been named Lawyer of the Year 3 times. Yay!
Thanks. Yeah, thanks.
And so, from your perspective, what reforms or changes would make the immigration system more effective for business and families alike? And if I were to nudge you into a specific response, I would want you to, I used to work for IBM, so that whole analogy about Y2K, bringing all those guys in, that I made a lot of extra money those years because everybody wanted to buy 2 mainframes. I'm like, okay, press hard 3 copies. We'll get you 2 mainframes during the Y2K era. And then you brought up the whole thing that we need an upgrade. We're patch. So how would you, if you had your way, how would you reform the system so that it was, new and improved? Let's disrupt this puppy, and how would we improve it?
Well, I think the sponsorship mechanism still works very well because, again, I'm going to reveal my capitalist tendencies, right? I think it's good to deal with the demand of immigration for our supply, our needs here in the United States. And as I mentioned earlier, that they're capped at certain numbers based in 1990. I think either we got to get rid of the caps, or we got to significantly make them related somehow to the market demands of the particular times. Because these arbitrary caps of 65,000 for the H-1B, 195,000 for green cards for each country. And if you're oversubscribed, too bad. If you're undersubscribed, you don't get credit to the other countries. That's just 1990. That's 20th century thinking. We have to think 21st century. So I think we ought to, I know some people will say, well, the caps are there to protect U.S. workers. Well, my whole feeling is that I've never seen, okay, again, this is my own personal bias. I don't think you're going to see a loss of workers from losing a job to an immigrant. I think you're going to see a loss of work losing out to AI or technology. Think to your grocery stores or I go to CVS. I went to the machine to try and check out. I like to go to the cashier when I can, but the cashier wasn't there at the time. So I went to the automated thing where I scanned in my stuff myself and put it in the bag. That ultimately is what's going to take away a job from a U.S. worker, is the automation piece. And so I'm not saying we don't dive into automation. I'm not saying we don't pursue AI. We got to figure out a way to have technology and human workforce work together. Immigration, to say that immigrants take away jobs from U.S. workers is really not, I don't think it's true at all. I mean, you hear about work shortages all the time when you go to restaurants or something like that, all the time. And it's true. Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. In the tech industry, everything. So and it's not because immigrants are taking away jobs, it's because we don't have enough people to do that. I mean, I always tell, there's another analogy that I use. If I'm not too far away from where Joe Louis Arena was and where Little Caesars Arena is now. I mean, can you imagine most of those hockey players or Tigers players are foreign nationals? All right. So imagine if we said, you know what, forget it. We're going to make them all American born.
Oh.
We would never win the Stanley Cup.
Oh my gosh.
But hey, we have a lot of people employed. I mean, the thing is, the reason why and I'm not saying foreign workers are better than U.S. workers at all. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that our country is based upon the fact that we don't care where you're from. And that I'm going to sound like Reagan right now. We don't care where you're from. If you can do the job and you can do it well, you're good enough. And we'll figure out the immigration piece later. All right. So that covers you whether you're born here or born somewhere else. We don't care. So, I mean, just to say that we need to get rid of foreign workers because it'll open up U.S. jobs, it's just not realistic. And I use the sports analogy because that's the truth. I mean,
it hits home very clearly.
Yeah.
And so I'm hearing you say, get rid of the caps.
Or at least make it more market oriented at the very least.
And where did they come up with those numbers? What's that algorithm?
Well, that was probably back in the 1990s. I couldn't tell you that.
That's a good question. And then I just think that makes me think. I love that you make me think. So the immigration debate gets political quickly, even in our office, especially with what happened to Charlie Kirk last week. Not the immigration, but there's so many hot buttons and everything. Everybody's so triggered, and for a week we got off the immigration because of what happened to Charlie, which God bless his own.
It's terrible.
But everyone keeps getting triggered, and it's so sad to everybody be on pins and needles. How do you cut through the noise? I know you can, from what I've been listening to so far. You have a very good logical brain. So how do you keep focused on the human aspect and business outcomes, and you don't get all wrapped up in the headlines?
Well, I mean, I have an advantage in that I actually work into it, and the way I just try and talk to people. Going back to your comments about Charlie Clark, I didn't agree with everything he did, but I agree with a lot of things he did too. But that's okay. All right. And one of the things I really did agree was we got to start talking to each other, which is part of the reason why I got on this podcast. I'm doing presentations and stuff, and whenever I can, to try and educate people, saying, I'm not trying to copy his prove me wrong type thing. But I mean, if you got someone who tells me that they've lost a job because of an immigrant, I go, well, let's talk about it. What happened? Did you really lose a job because of the immigrant or something else? I mean, now the thing is, there are certain points of agreement we can all agree on. If someone with a criminal background who's an immigrant commits a crime and hurts somebody else, we can all agree that person should go through the process of law, and if they end up being removed, then they end up getting removed. No immigration advocate even is going to say that we should allow that process to happen. They're not going to say, no, that person should still stay. I'm sorry, you broke the law and you actually killed someone or something like that. But if there's like other factors, like let's say they didn't commit a crime, but they're trying to litigate their ability to stay because they're seeking political asylum because they're from a country, or the Ukrainians are trying to seek the ability to stay here. I mean, that's something we should look at. Similarly, we should look at again looking at alleviating the numbers for like the H-1B workers. So what I'm really worried about is I'm worried about us losing our ability to get the best talent in the world, whether it's homegrown or foreign. All right, that's what I'm really worried about, because then we lose our competitive edge. That's really what I'm worried about.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I totally agree with you 100%. I totally respect your opinion, and I'm totally on board with that. So let's go a little bit on the personal and professional insights. Looking at your journey, from Michigan State. Go Green.
Oh, boy.
Into immigration law, and what drew you into this field in the first place? Why'd you do this in the first place?
All right, so I'm gonna tell you a couple funny stories. Well, actually, I'll tell you one funny story and then one more, a little more serious. So the funny story is this. So my dad, he's a big fan of the current president. He and I disagree on stuff, but he's very proud of me and all stuff, and I love him to death. But my dad, it's funny. He says, so he was a green card holder when he met my mother and married her. She was a J1 foreign exchange doctor. All right. She eventually went to psychiatry. They're both retired now. And so she was pregnant with me like 8, 9 months when so let me take a step back. The J1s require that you come in, do your training, and return to your home country for 2 years. So that way your US training can benefit your home country. However, there are exceptions to that if you can prove hardship, that if you were to return, there'd be some health problem or something like that. Well, you know, I'm going to date myself. 50 plus years ago, she was pregnant with me, maybe more, or she was pregnant with me, like 9 months pregnant, and her J1 status was coming to an end, and she was supposed to return home to the Philippines. And my dad was saying, look, I'm a green card holder. That kid's a US citizen. He's about to be born. No airline will take her on a plane. So can you waive this? Now, back then, interviews were done, J1 waiver interviews were done at the local INS office here in Detroit. And the officer agreed with that argument line of thinking, you know, because, I mean, you know, if you're going to airplanes about 50, 60 years ago, I mean, it's not, into the Philippines would be several connecting flights.
They're not allowed to fly.
Yeah, they wouldn't be allowed to fly, 9 months pregnant. So the officer granted the J waiver, gave her a green card based upon my father's sponsorship. And so my dad always tells me this story. He told the story at my wedding of all places. And so my dad tells the story. He says, yeah, I got your mom in, me. You know, I'm a fan of Trump. I got your mom in. So when it came from one of my parents' anniversary parties, I told the same story. And I said, I've been waiting for decades to get him back at this because I wanted to say, Dad, you didn't get mom in. I got mom in. So you asked me how I got into this. I said, before I was even born, I was practicing law, trying to get my mother in because I was the basis for my mom's J1 waiver.
That's beautiful.
So that's the funny story.
That's,
I mean,
that is the most origin story I've ever heard. What an origin story. That's perfect.
Yeah.
It drew you.
So the more serious one is that I remember my grandparents, the night before their oath ceremony, they were scheduled to be sworn in as US citizens. And all they had to do, I mean, I know this. I mean, all they had to do was say, yes, 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 I do, and then say the Pledge of Allegiance. But they were so nervous. I mean, they were in their mid-70s. They were so nervous. They stayed up all night, couldn't sleep. And then they got it. And I said, you know what? I want to help people in their situation. So that's the more serious thing. And I was a teenager when I saw that. So that's when I had some interest. Now, everyone, of course, in law school is interested in criminal law because that's what we're trained on. Immigration law was another one. And only because of my Filipino background and because I knew a lot of doctors, I was thinking about medical malpractice defense. I found out medical malpractice defense was mainly insurance defense. So I shifted more toward my focus towards immigration. So that's how I got into this business.
That's a fantastic story. And you guided so many people through these high stake transitions. What's one client story that has stayed with you and reminds you of why this important work matters?
Oh boy, there's so many. I will tell you, well, I'll tell you the common theme is when you go up to the border, and whether it's a TN or an F1 or just an H1, when people get there, you know, shoulders a little shrugged. And then when we walked out, relaxed. All right. I mean, that happens a lot. I mean, I just covered a couple green card interviews and just finished. I mean, every one of them, they have all, I mean, to me, and it sounds like I sound like I'm copping out a little bit. And I've represented some professional sports teams too. People getting their green cards through that or their visas and stuff. Or, you know, some people get stressed out over the slightest mistake on a document and then we just correct it. That whole seeing the shoulders relax back down, seeing them take a sigh of relief, that's what's worth it for me every single time. And that happens so many times, even for the foreign national workers employer. I mean, for the US citizen people who are around them, they're just so happy that it went through, you know. So that's what, I mean, every time, every single one of those things. I mean, there are some that don't go through, let's be honest with you. And those things that I feel bad for them. They haunt me, and they sometimes go through for various reasons. And you
Nice.
did, but as long as I did my best, that's what I can honestly say I did. So, but that's the reason why I do what I do. So.
Very, very insightful. I totally respect it. I really appreciate what you do, and it's such important work. I love business and I love immigration too. I think it's so important. I think that I love that we are focusing on trying to bring in some skilled workers and to bring in jobs into the United States. And I think that what you brought to the table today is so valuable to our audience. And I just was wondering if there's a chance in the maybe 12 to 18 months, do you think you might join us back on the Bullish on American Business podcast?
Well, Rose, you're family. You're like family because you're friends with good friends of mine. So that, as far as I'm concerned, that includes you in them. Plus, obviously, and I've been speaking with your daughter about immigration law as well. So, that's perfectly fine. You just got the only caveat is as long as I don't have a conflict in my schedule. That's all. I'd be more than happy to. We'll work it out by then.
I know you immigration attorneys have every minute is squeezed, and so we do appreciate the time you gave us today. And I just want to thank you. And before we wrap up this podcast, do you have any final words?
No, just keep fighting, folks. Keep hanging in there. Like what Rocky Balboa said, it's not how hard you can hit, it's how much you can get hit and keep moving forward. Just keep moving forward. Rocky Balboa, keep going.
Well, thanks again, and we'll see you guys next. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Bye.
Bye.